Look, we are looking at a financial document from March 1998 right now, and I have to say, the math on this page almost defies logic.
It really does. It's staggering.
Right. On one line, you have a restaurant chain that just 24 months prior was pulling in $300 million in system-wide sales. I mean, they had over 400 locations. They were so ubiquitous, they were literally a central plot point on a top-rated television show.
And then you look at the bottom line of this Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing.
Exactly. $14 million in assets, crushed under $150 million in debt.
Yeah.
It is a 10-to-1 ratio of total ruin.
It is the kind of balance sheet that forces you to, well, completely rethink how corporate scaling actually works. I mean, when you see a debt-to-asset ratio of that magnitude, it tells a very specific story.
Which is what, exactly?
It means a business didn't just stumble or, lose a few percentage points of market share. It means the company actively devoured itself from the inside out to sustain an illusion of growth.
And that is exactly what we're going to untangle for you today on this Peak to Dust deep dive. We are looking at the meteoric rise and the absolute collapse of the Kenny Rogers Roasters empire.
We have the corporate financial records, the U.S. District Court filings, and the franchise industry data.
Right. Our goal here is to figure out how a brand achieves total cultural dominance, only to get wiped off the American map so thoroughly that it ends up selling for pennies on the dollar.
To understand the sheer velocity of that collapse, we really have to start at the foundation because this company wasn't built organically over decades.
No.
It was engineered. We need to look at August 1991 in Coral Springs, Florida, and specifically at the two men who designed this operation.
Right, because on paper, a restaurant named after Kenny Rogers sounds like a pure novelty. I mean, a vanity project, right?
It does sound like that, yeah.
Have a country music icon, a guy who sold 100 million records. He had that massive cross-generational appeal. But pause for a second. You don't get to 300 million in revenue just because a singer's name's on the door.
Absolutely not.
It sounds to me like John Y. Brown Jr., his partner in this venture, just slapped a famous face on a spreadsheet. I mean, this wasn't a grassroots culinary startup. This was a scientifically engineered corporate juggernaut designed by a fast food apex predator.
That is a very accurate, very grave way to look at it. John Y. Brown Jr. is the actual engine here. If you look at his track record, he is arguably one of the most formidable architects in the history of the American franchise model.
Right.
Most people might remember him as the governor of Kentucky in the late 70s, but long before that, in 1964, he was the man who purchased Kentucky Fried Chicken directly from Harlan Sanders.
Wait, he bought KFC for $2 million in 1964.
Exactly, $2 million. And what Brown did with KFC is the blueprint for everything that follows in this story.
How so?
Well, he took a loose, somewhat chaotic network of independent diner-style restaurants that were simply paying a royalty to use Sanders' chicken recipe, and he ruthlessly standardized them.
Right, he brought corporate discipline to it.
Yes. He implemented the iconic red and white striped bucket design. He standardized the kitchen equipment, the real estate footprint, the menu offerings. He scaled it to over 1,500 locations, took the company public in 1969, and then sold his stake in 1971 for $284 million.
That is an unbelievable return on investment. So when we see Brown partnering with Kenny Rogers in 1991, we have to understand this isn't a guy who just wants to open a nice neighborhood chicken joint.
Not at all.
This is a guy who knows exactly how to acquire real estate, bundle franchise licenses, and scale a concept nationally at breakneck speed.
He understood customer acquisition costs better than anyone in the industry. Look, if you launch a new restaurant brand from scratch, you have to spend millions of dollars and years of time convincing the public to trust you.
Building the brand equity from zero.
Exactly. By bringing in Kenny Rogers, who at the time had a very wholesome, established association with food as a former spokesman for the Dole Food Company Brown, bypassed that entire trust-building phase.
So the celebrity branding was basically a smokescreen for a purely aggressive real estate and franchise land grab.
Precisely. Kenny Rogers delivered instant international brand awareness on day one. It was a highly synchronized deployment of scaling expertise and celebrity branding.
And the menu they deployed was just as calculated. In 1991, they didn't try to go head-to-head with KFC or McDonald's in the deep fryer.
No, that would have been a mistake.
They bypassed the highly saturated fried food market entirely. They pioneered this deliciously healthy rotisserie concept.
The positioning was mathematically designed for a shifting demographic. In the early 90s, you start seeing the first major waves of dietary pushback against traditional fast food.
Right, the beginning of the low-fat craze.
Yes. Consumers were looking for convenience, but they were feeling immense guilt about feeding their families fried chicken multiple times a week.
Which explains their exact marketing slogan: less fat, less salt, less calories.
Right.
They were explicitly telling the consumer, you can have the speed of fast food without the guilt.
And the menu engineering reflected that promise perfectly. They focused on wood-fired rotisserie chicken marinated in citrus, herbs, and spices. The marketing heavily emphasized the cooking process itself.
Showing the chicken spinning on the spit.
Exactly. They pushed the narrative that the rotisserie allowed the excess fat to drip away, while the constant rotation sealed in the natural juices and roasted flavor.
And then they surrounded that protein with sides that signaled a premium, home-cooked Sunday dinner. I mean, you weren't getting a paper sleeve of French fries.
No.
You were getting jacket potatoes, macaroni and cheese, and their signature homemade cornbread muffins. Specifically, they had chocolate raisin and golden vanilla varieties that became massive selling points.
It is brilliant psychological positioning. It provided the ultimate compromise for the working parent.
Right, alleviating the guilt.
Yeah, it allowed consumers to indulge in the extreme convenience of a drive-through while maintaining the illusion that they were providing a wholesome, traditional home-style meal for their family. This specific demographic targeting is what created such immediate traction in the market.
Well, let's talk about the speed of that traction,
Yeah.
because the expansion phase of this company is where the numbers get truly staggering. The very first store opens in August 1991.
Right.
By 1993, just 2 years later, they hit exactly 100 locations.
The acceleration of their real estate acquisition and franchise licensing was unprecedented. By 1995 and heading into 1996, the brand reached its absolute apex. They were operating 425 restaurants globally.
And financially, that translates to the $300 million in system-wide sales we mentioned earlier. But I want to break down the unit-level economics, because understanding what a single store was doing is the only way to understand how the whole machine eventually broke down.
That is a critical point. Based on the franchise disclosure documents and industry analysis from 1995, a highly optimized freestanding Kenny Rogers roasters equipped with a drive-through was moving an astonishing volume of product.
How much volume are we talking about?
They were selling approximately 1,800 chickens per week per store.
Okay, let's do the math on that for you, the listener. 1,800 chickens a week is roughly 250 chickens a day.
Right.
If a store is open for 12 hours, that means they are roasting, prepping, and selling over 20 whole chickens every single hour, nonstop, from open to close.
Which translates to roughly $1 million in annual sales per unit. And the most critical metric here is how that food was leaving the building.
Meaning if it was dine-in or drive-through.
Right. 45 to 50% of those sales were coming from off-premise takeout.
Meaning people weren't sitting down in the dining room at all. They were just taking it home to their dining room tables.
Correct. The corporate leadership was aggressively targeting a 60% off-premise metric. They were capitalizing on a trend that industry analysts at the time coined home meal replacement.
Home meal replacement. That is a very corporate way to frame dinner.
It is. The goal wasn't just to be a restaurant. The goal was to entirely replace the act of cooking dinner at home.
And the industry was completely buying into this narrative.
Yeah.
We're looking at 3 consecutive wins in 1996, 1997, and 1998 of the America's Choice Award winner for the best chicken chain by Restaurants and Institutions magazine.
Yeah, they didn't just have market share. They had critical prestige.
And that prestige culminated in absolute pop culture saturation. The most glaring, undeniable proof of their cultural footprint is the 1996 episode of Seinfeld titled The Chicken Roaster.
It really is the peak of their visibility.
Right. The episode revolves entirely around the restaurant. A Kenny Rogers Roasters opens across the street from Kramer's apartment, and he is subjected to this blinding red neon light radiating from their massive signage.
Right, the light is keeping him awake.
Exactly. He tries to boycott them, but he eventually becomes completely addicted to the chicken. They explicitly name-drop the broccoli, the wood-roasted chicken. It is a 22-minute commercial for the brand.
And look, when a brand reaches a level of cultural relevance where it can anchor an episode of the #1 television program in the country, it creates a very dangerous illusion.
Dangerous in what way?
It signals to franchisees, to real estate developers, and to Wall Street that the brand is an immovable fixture of the American landscape. It projects permanent corporate invincibility.
But this is exactly where we have to ask you to look past the neon sign and the awards. $1 million in revenue per freestanding store sounds incredible.
On paper, yes.
But revenue is not profit. I have to wonder how much of this hypergrowth was fueled by genuine, sustainable consumer demand, and how much of it was just debt-leveraged franchise bloat.
That is the ultimate question.
Were they actually making a healthy margin on those 1,800 chickens a week? Or were they just borrowing money to build more stores to create the illusion of momentum?
That is the exact fracture point we need to analyze. Rapid territorial expansion requires massive capital, and hypervisibility paints a massive target on your back.
It attracts predators.
Yes, it signals to your competitors that there is blood in the water and money to be made. But before the major competitors could even strike, that rapid expansion triggered grave legal scrutiny that would expose the cracks in the foundation.
Right. Let's dive into the first real crack in the foundation. This is a massive legal war over intellectual property that starts almost immediately. We're looking at a U.S. District Court filing in Miami, dated December 18th, 1992.
We really need to keep the timeline in mind here. This is barely 16 months after the very first Kenny Rogers Roasters opened its doors.
It is incredibly early in their life cycle.
Exactly. A Miami-based corporate entity called Clucker's Wood Roasted Chicken, Inc. files a $10 million lawsuit against Roasters Ltd., John Y. Brown, and Kenny Rogers personally.
The allegations laid out by Clucker's attorney, a man named Eric Isakoff, are incredibly specific and, frankly, damaging.
Very damaging.
Isakoff alleged that 2 years prior to this suit, John Y. Brown Jr. had signed an option to buy an existing Clucker's store located on Biscayne Boulevard in North Miami.
According to the legal filings, Brown entered into this agreement, observed the Clucker's operation from the inside, and then subsequently backed out of the deal.
He walked away from it entirely.
He did. He willingly forfeited a $50,000 deposit. But the lawsuit alleges that he didn't just walk away. It alleges that he systematically stole Clucker's proprietary recipes, their specific business methods, and their exact interior store layout.
Isakoff actually went on the record to the press with a very pointed statement. He said, and I'm quoting from the source material here, he got his own investors, hired a key employee, and opened up a business with the same layout and the same menus. Unless you looked at the name on the door, you wouldn't know which restaurant you're in.
That is a staggering accusation of corporate theft.
How did the Roasters legal team respond to that?
The defense strategy from Roasters attorney Ace Blackburn was entirely dismissive. He categorized the entire filing as a nuisance suit.
A nuisance suit.
Yes. He claimed that whenever you have a high-net-worth public figure like Kenny Rogers attached to a corporation, you inevitably attract opportunistic litigation.
So they tried to brush it off as a cash grab.
Exactly. Blackburn's core argument was that the actual concept of cooking a chicken over a wood fire is ancient. It's not a patentable technology.
Right.
And to differentiate the brands, he explicitly pointed to the interior design. He stated, "A Kenny Rogers Roasters has photos of Kenny Rogers and gold and platinum records on the wall, and during the meal, you listen to Kenny Rogers and his friends sing. If you go into Clucker's, there's a chicken on the wall."
That is a highly aggressive, almost condescending legal defense.
It was incredibly arrogant. Furthermore, Brown's personal defense for backing out of the Biscayne Boulevard purchase was entirely logistical. He claimed he learned that specific street would be under heavy construction for several months, which would destroy foot traffic, so he chose to forfeit the deposit and build his own franchise operation elsewhere.
But the defense rhetoric doesn't match the actual outcome of the lawsuit. If we look at the resolution in August 1994, Kenny Rogers Roasters didn't go to trial.
No, they didn't.
They didn't win a decisive legal victory and prove they were entirely original. Instead, they executed a defensive corporate buyout. They acquired a majority stake in Clucker's.
They absorbed the plaintiff to silence the litigation. In corporate law, when you cannot guarantee a victory that will protect your core intellectual property, you simply acquire the threat.
Exactly. But let's think about the mechanical reality of that for a second. They didn't win the war of ideas. They simply bought the battlefield to bury the evidence.
That is a perfect analogy.
How does absorbing a $10 million legal distraction and then spending the cash required to actually buy a regional 4-unit competitor in South Florida impact a company that is trying to scale globally?
It is a catastrophic misallocation of focus and capital. You are draining your war chest to put out a regional fire. And the timing couldn't have been worse.
Because they were about to get hit from all sides.
Yes. While Roasters was tied up neutralizing cluckers in Miami, a vastly wealthier, significantly more aggressive enemy was preparing to launch a full-scale assault on the entire national rotisserie market.
And that assault triggers what franchise historians refer to as the chicken wars. This is where the market hemorrhage truly begins for Kenny Rogers Roasters.
The primary aggressor in this war was Boston Chicken, which smartly rebranded to Boston Market in 1995 to emphasize their side dishes and that home meal replacement strategy.
Right.
In November 1993, Boston Market executed a highly successful initial public offering.
Let's explain what that IPO actually meant for the battlefield. When Boston Market went public, their stock didn't just perform well. It soared from $20 to $48.50 almost immediately.
An IPO of that magnitude fundamentally alters the physics of franchise expansion.
Right, because of the massive influx of cash.
Exactly. Typically, a franchise grows by selling licenses to independent operators and collecting a slow trickle of franchise fees and royalties. It takes time.
It's a slow burn.
But Boston Market's IPO injected them with hundreds of millions of dollars in liquid capital. They didn't have to wait for franchise fees. They used that massive war chest to execute a staggering rollout of 450 new corporate stores in 1994 alone.
450 stores in 12 months. They were opening more than one store every single day.
It was a blitzkrieg.
And they were dropping these stores right into the exact same suburban markets, targeting the exact same families that Kenny Rogers Roasters relied upon.
And Boston Market's menu was designed for maximum friction. They offered an expansive array of hot and cold side orders, rice pilaf, steamed vegetables, real mashed potatoes, stuffing.
A much wider variety than Roasters.
Yes, they were competing head-to-head for the highly lucrative dinner day part, offering a product that looked virtually identical to Roasters' core offering, but with more variety.
And it wasn't just a two-front war. The traditional fast food sector, the deep-fried giants, realized that this healthy rotisserie trend was starting to bleed their market share.
They definitely noticed.
They didn't just sit back. Kentucky Fried Chicken, the very empire John Y. Brown Jr. built, launched its own rotisserie gold line.
This was a calculated, retaliatory strike. KFC leveraged their massive existing real estate footprint, their established supply chains, and their marketing budget to instantly offer a competing non-fried option.
They didn't have to scout new real estate.
Exactly. They didn't need to build new stores. They just needed to buy the ovens and put them in existing kitchens.
Furthermore, regional players like El Palo Loco aggressively pushed their flame-broiled options, and they attacked purely on price.
Price is where it really hurts.
Executives at El Palo Loco went on the record stating they were selling the exact same size piece of chicken for $1.99. They were intentionally undercutting the premium pricing models of both Boston Market and Kenny Rogers Roasters.
Roasters was completely outmaneuvered. Strategically, they failed to differentiate their menu significantly enough from Boston Market.
Right.
If a consumer has a choice between two identical rotisserie chicken dinners, they will often choose the one with more side dish variety, which Boston Market had.
And if they want a cheap option, they go to KFC or El Palo Loco.
Exactly. Simultaneously, Roasters lacked the low-price, high-volume operational efficiency of KFC or El Palo Loco. They were trapped in the middle of the market. They were too expensive to be cheap fast food and outscaled by their direct premium competitor.
This brings us to a massive structural vulnerability. Because it wasn't just the competitors that killed them, it was the physics of the food itself. The rotisserie cooking process actually became a fatal liability.
This is where we have to look at the operational data of the kitchen. Roasting a chicken on a wood-fired commercial rotisserie is not like dropping a basket of fries into hot oil.
No, it's incredibly labor-intensive.
It requires highly specialized, expensive equipment, but more importantly, it requires immense, sustained manual labor.
All right, let's break down the mechanics of what that means for a franchise owner. Our sources indicate that managing these rotisserie machines added a full 2 hours of labor to the daily operation of a single store.
Think about the process. The chickens must be individually marinated. They must be manually trussed and skewered onto heavy metal spits.
Which takes time and training.
And then the rotisserie must be constantly monitored for temperature and wood distribution to ensure the meat cooks evenly without burning the skin.
It's not a set-it-and-forget-it machine.
No, not at all. As the fat renders and drips, the machine requires intense daily breakdown and cleaning to prevent grease fires.
That is 2 hours of paid labor every single day at every single location just to manage the cooking apparatus.
Exactly. When you combine the initial capital expenditure of buying those massive ovens with the sustained daily labor costs required to run them, you absolutely destroy the profit margins that traditional fried fast food enjoys.
Because frying is just so much cheaper.
Fried chicken is fast, it is highly scalable, and it requires minimal specialized attention from the staff. When the initial cultural hype of Kenny Rogers roasters died down and the daily volume of sales began to drop, the fixed costs of that rotisserie process remained constant.
The ovens still need cleaning whether you sell 100 chickens or 10.
Precisely. It started bleeding the individual franchise units dry.
Which raises a profound question about executive foresight for you to consider. John Y. Brown Jr. is the man who engineered the modern KFC.
Right.
He knows exactly how efficient a fryer is. How does a seasoned executive fail to anticipate the retaliatory strike from the traditional fast food sector? Did he truly believe that KFC, the monster he helped create, would just surrender their dinner revenue without a fight?
It appears to be a textbook case of corporate hubris. Brown seemingly assumed that the consumer paradigm shift toward healthier options was so absolute that it would permanently shield roasters from the fried chicken giants.
He thought the market had moved on from fried food entirely.
He did. He drastically underestimated KFC's ability to pivot. He assumed their operational inertia would prevent them from adopting a rotisserie product, failing to realize that KFC had the capital to simply buy their way into the market.
So let's combine these factors. You have shrinking market share due to Boston Market's massive IPO-funded rollout. You have relentless, aggressive price competition from KFC and El Palo Loco.
Right.
And you have bloated, inflexible operational costs tied to the manual labor of the rotisserie machines themselves.
It's a lethal combination.
This exact combination is what triggers the rapid financial death spiral. We have to look at the grim reality of March 1998.
In March 1998, Fort Lauderdale-based Roasters Corp. officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
I want to look closely at the math of that court filing again because it illustrates the sheer velocity of this destruction. $14 million in assets, $150 million in debt.
It's staggering.
How does a company accrue that much debt while holding so little value? Where did the money actually go?
The massive debt accumulation was the direct result of real estate overexpansion. When Boston Market started opening 450 stores a year, roasters felt immense pressure to keep up.
They had to maintain their footprint.
But unlike Boston Market, they didn't have a massive IPO war chest, so they borrowed heavily. They took out massive commercial loans, leveraging against the projected future royalties of their franchisees to acquire prime real estate and build out large, expensive, freestanding stores.
They were gambling that the units would always generate $1 million a year.
Precisely. They modeled their debt service on their peak revenue. But when the unit-level revenues began to plummet due to the chicken wars, when a store went from selling 1,800 chickens a week to maybe 800, the franchisee could no longer pay the corporate royalties.
And the dominoes fall.
Right. And the corporate entity could no longer service the massive debt on the properties they had leased or purchased.
The overhead simply crushed them. We see the immediate violent fallout of this in the court documents. The sudden, shocking closure of all but 7 of their wholly owned corporate restaurants.
7 out of all those corporate units.
They literally could not afford to keep the lights on and pay the staff to clean the ovens.
Furthermore, the franchise support system completely collapsed. A franchise is supposed to be a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
The franchise pays royalties, and corporate provides national advertising, menu innovation, and supply chain leverage. But when corporate is bankrupt, that support vanishes.
We have explicit documentation of franchise rebellion in the sources. Take Rogers, Nevada, Inc., for example. They were the franchise operating 4 prime locations in the Las Vegas Valley. They announced the simultaneous closure of all their restaurants.
The general manager there, a man named Ralph Good, went on the record citing a total failure of the corporate entity.
What'd he say?
He stated, "When we pay fees, we expect to get certain benefits. But so far, NF Roasters did not do what we would have expected to help support the business."
Good also highlighted a fatal operational flaw that corporate refused to address. He noted that relying on high volume from a single, large, premium product whole family dinners was unsustainable for daily traffic.
Right. Because you can't eat a whole roasted chicken for lunch every day.
Exactly. He stated, there's just not enough small-priced items to keep people coming here on a regular basis. Corporate had no capital to develop and market new lunch items or snacks, leaving the franchisees with an inflexible menu in a declining market.
This localized failure in Las Vegas perfectly mirrors the systemic collapse across the entire national network. The corporate entity was paralyzed by debt, fighting off creditors, and entirely unable to provide the marketing air cover required to keep the independent operators afloat.
And in the midst of this bankruptcy, as the franchisees are drowning, we see the brutal fracturing of the original founding partnership. The celebrity face of the brand actively turns against the sinking ship.
This is a very dark turn in the corporate history. During the Chapter 11 bankruptcy hearings, Kenny Rogers sought to legally sever his ties to the corporation entirely.
He wanted out.
Yes. His attorney, a man named Donald Harkleroad, actively filed objections in federal court to legally strip the bankrupt Roasters Corps of the right to use the Stinger's name, his likeness, and his voice.
Harkleroad stated, "If it could be demonstrated to us that the company will be viable, he's more than willing to work with whoever ends up acquiring the company."
The legal maneuver itself sends a chilling message to the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rogers viewed the bankrupt entity as a highly toxic liability to his personal brand. He argued that the fundamental license agreement, the very core of the company's identity, ceased to exist the moment they filed for Chapter 11.
The court-appointed managers who were desperately trying to salvage some value to pay off the creditors naturally fought back. They argued the license agreement was an intrinsic corporate asset that they possessed the right to sell to a new buyer.
Which makes sense from an asset recovery standpoint.
It does, but from a public relations standpoint, the damage was irreversible. The founder, the literal namesake of the company, was actively litigating to erase his association with the ruins of his own empire.
With the corporate entity dead in the water, the massive real estate debt unpaid, the franchisees closing their doors, and the celebrity founder fighting to pry his name off the neon signage, the remains of the empire were carved up and sold.
Which brings us to the American extinction of the brand.
Right. In April 1999, the corporate sell-off was finalized. Nathan's Famous Inc., a legacy company primarily known for its hot dogs and crinkle-cut fries, purchased the bankrupt remains of Roasters Corps for a mere $1.25 million.
I really want you to listen to that contract.
That's unbelievable.
You have a brand that generated $300 million in system-wide sales just 3 years prior. It dominated national television. It operated over 400 locations.
And now?
And now the entire corporate entity, the intellectual property, the remaining contracts, all of it is acquired for $1.25 million. It is a humiliating acquisition price. It represents the total evaporation of corporate value.
It is essentially a fire sale. Nathan's bought the intellectual property simply because it was cheap enough to be a low-risk experiment.
Yeah.
But their strategic vision for the brand proved to be entirely disastrous.
Oh, it was a profound miscalculation. They attempted to create combo shops.
Combo shop.
Yes. They physically merged the deliciously healthy wood-fired rotisserie chicken concept into the exact same retail footprint as the Nathan's hot dog menu.
Think about the psychology of that for a consumer for a second. The entire initial success of Kenny Rogers Roasters was based on the premium health halo. Less fat, less salt, less calories.
Right.
It was marketed as a wholesome, elevated alternative to fast food. And suddenly, you walk into a store to buy this premium rotisserie chicken, and the building smells like hot dog grease and deep-fried potatoes.
It creates massive cognitive dissonance. It was a complete ideological mismatch. You simply cannot successfully market a premium, health-conscious family dinner in a facility that is aggressively pushing fast food hot dogs.
It just doesn't work.
No. It entirely diluted and ultimately destroyed whatever premium equity remained in the Kenny Rogers Roasters brand identity.
The American market rejected this combo concept entirely. From that point on, we can trace the steady, relentless disappearance of the brand from the United States.
The footprint just kept shrinking.
By the year 2000, the footprint had collapsed to only 90 locations left worldwide, with just 40 remaining in the U.S.
The brand was in full retreat. They were abandoning their expensive freestanding real estate and shrinking into mall food courts, toll road rest stops, and non-traditional venues.
They went from being a destination restaurant to a convenience afterthought.
Exactly.
And we have the precise date of the definitive end of the American empire, December 31st, 2011. On that exact day, the absolute last U.S. location quietly shut its doors in a mall food court in Ontario, California.
A completely unceremonious death for a brand that once bathed primetime television in its neon light.
The sheer speed of this destruction is what makes this case so vital to study. In exactly 20 years, from the first store in August 1991 to that food court closure in December 2011, A cultural titan was born, conquered the national market, achieved hundreds of millions in sales, was crushed by 150 million in debt, went completely bankrupt, and vanished entirely from its country of origin.
It is exceptionally rare to see a corporate collapse of this magnitude and velocity without a specific acute catalyst.
Like a scandal.
Right, like massive accounting fraud, lethal product contamination, or a sudden regulatory change. But there was no single catastrophic event here.
It was systemic.
This was simply a failure of business strategy. It was an over-leveraged balance sheet, a bloated operational model, and a fatal inability to adapt to the retaliatory market forces they provoked.
But, and this is where the story takes a massive pivot, the autopsy doesn't actually end in that abandoned California food court, because while the American operation was bleeding out, the intellectual property was migrating east.
It was.
It was preparing for a highly lucrative, almost unbelievable second life. We have to examine the Asian resurrection and the current, modern operations of the brand.
To understand this resurrection, we have to look closely at the ownership timeline. John Y. Brown Jr., likely sensing the impending financial strain of the chicken wars, had actually sold his interest in the franchise to the Malaysia-based Berjaya Group back in 1996, well before the American bankruptcy filing.
So the Berjaya Group had a foothold early on, and they essentially bided their time through the entire Nathan's Famous debacle.
Exactly.
By April 2008, Berjaya Corporation Berhad fully acquired the parent company from Nathan's Famous. They consolidated complete global ownership of the brand, the recipes, and the trademarks.
This acquisition triggered a massive geographic and operational shift. The brand completely abandoned the Western Hemisphere. They pivoted their entire focus to the Middle East and Asia.
And they went hard into those markets.
We are looking at an aggressive, highly calculated expansion strategy across Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, India, Thailand, Singapore, and the UAE.
And the financial reality of the brand under Berjaya completely contradicts the American failure. In 2023, the brand experienced a 22% system-wide sales growth. They aren't just surviving, they are thriving.
The unit economics they have achieved in these regions are highly optimized. Take the Philippines market, for example.
What are the numbers there?
According to the franchise data, investors opening a new location in the Philippines are seeing a projected 50% return on investment with a remarkably short 1 to 2 year capital payback period.
The upfront capital required to launch a store in the Philippines is between 8 and 12 million Philippine pesos. And they have incredibly aggressive growth targets, aiming to reach over 150 locations in the Philippines alone by the end of 2024.
It's a massive scale-up.
Which forces us to ask the fundamental question: why did this exact same brand survive and thrive in Asia when it completely collapsed under its own weight in the United States?
It is the result of a perfect storm of market fit, strategic repositioning, and an absolute lack of the entrenched competitors that destroyed them in America.
The chicken wars didn't follow them across the ocean.
Right. First, you have the Western branding cachet. In many emerging Asian markets, established American brands, even those that failed domestically, carry a perception of premium quality and status.
But they didn't just rely on the American name. They actually doubled down on the one thing that originally made the brand successful back in 1991.
Absolutely. They accurately identified a genuine regional demand in these specific Asian markets for a perceived healthier, premium, fast casual chicken option.
Differentiating themselves again.
Yes. They successfully differentiated themselves from the local, highly entrenched fried chicken competitors, massive regional giants like Jollibee in the Philippines, or the highly localized versions of KFC.
They leaned into the health aspect with empirical marketing. They initiated what they called a farm advocacy program, actively supporting local urban farming initiatives to project corporate responsibility.
It's a very modern approach.
They rebranded their marketing materials with the slogan, "Deliciously Healthy." And they went as far as getting their core menu items chemically tested and certified by SGS Philippines, heavily highlighting their high protein and low calorie metrics. They gave the modern consumer hard data to support the health claims.
Furthermore, they were exceptionally smart about product localization.
How so?
Well, while they strictly maintained the core visual identity, the rotisserie chicken and the signature muffins, they deeply integrated regional staples like rice dishes and localized flavor profiles into the menu. They respected the culinary expectations of the region while maintaining the premium Western aesthetic.
It really feels like the corporate equivalent of witness protection. I mean, the brand shed its massive American debts, relocated halfway across the globe, assumed a highly successful new life, and integrated perfectly into a new economy.
It really is a second life.
But I have to wonder about the branding itself. To the modern Asian consumer walking into one of these 150 locations in Manila today, does the name Kenny Rogers mean a 1970s American country singer? Or does it simply translate to premium roasted chicken?
For the vast majority of their current, younger demographic customer base in Asia, the connection to the American country music icon is entirely secondary, if it is known at all.
It's just a name to them.
Exactly. The brand name has been completely divorced from its original celebrity context. It no longer relies on the star power of the founder. It functions purely as a signifier of the product itself. The brand outlived the man.
Think about the massive arc we just mapped out. We saw the brilliant, highly calculated architecture by John Y. Brown Jr. in 1991. We tracked the zenith of the empire, hitting $300 million in sales, 1,800 chickens a week per store, and dominating the cultural zeitgeist on Seinfeld.
An incredible peak.
We examine the fatal crush of the $150 million real estate debt, the brutal, unyielding reality of the chicken wars, the humiliating $1.25 million scavenged by Nathan's, and finally, the ultimate rebirth and optimization under the Berjaya Group in Asia.
It is a stark, empirical reminder of the gravity of the market. It demonstrates exactly how quickly empires can turn to dust when the ambition of expansion outpaces the operational reality of the product.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question for you to ponder. If a brand collapses spectacularly in its country of origin, crushed by debt, furious franchisees, and ruthless competitors, crushed by all of that, but thrives immensely halfway across the world using the exact same name, the exact same logo, and the exact same core product, where did the failure actually lie?
Was the Kenny Rogers Roasters concept inherently flawed? Or is the American hypercapitalist franchise model simply designed to build empires fast, leveraging massive debt just so it can tear them down even faster when the margins slip by a fraction of a percent?
Consider what other dead American brands you assume went bankrupt and vanished decades ago might secretly be ruling the world, thriving far from home, completely unrecognized by the people who originally built them. Because as we've seen today on Peak to Dust, just because the financial autopsy shows the bones of a company are broken here, doesn't mean the machine isn't alive, and roasting chicken somewhere else.